Hey guys, so in today's video, I'm going to walk you through a LAMP stack server setup on DigitalOcean. Then I'm going to show you deployment using FileZilla and FTP. And then I'm also going to show you how to configure your DNS settings. I use hover.com. I have links to everything down in the description, including the repository with all of the instructions. If you're new to deployment and you've never bought a hosting account or bought a domain name before, I have links to DigitalOcean and hover.com. They are affiliate links. I get a small commission if you choose to use them. It's obviously totally optional. I think on DigitalOcean, if you use my link, you will get 2 months free. So I'll leave those down in the description. I also have a link to this repository, how to deploy a website to DigitalOcean, a LAMP stack, SSH FTP for Windows specifically, and a DNS setup. So let's get started. Let's go over to DigitalOcean first. Go ahead and create an account if you haven't yet. Once you create an account, DigitalOcean is going to make a default project for you. So you can see here over on the left under projects, I have a project called Angela J. Holden, and you can create multiple projects. And we don't have anything here yet, so I'm going to click this green button, create, and we are going to create a droplet. Not a GPU droplet, just a droplet. And right away down here at the bottom, you're going to see $32 a month. Pay no attention to that for now. That is going to change. We are definitely not going to spend $32 a month, but let's work our way down this page first. I generally choose New York. I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, so I'm kind of smack dab in the country. You want to choose a region or a data center that is as close to your location as possible. I could probably choose New York, San Francisco, or Atlanta. I don't think it would matter. I generally just stick with New York, and I go with the default data center. Choose an image. We want Marketplace, and we're looking for LAMP on Ubuntu, and as of this recording, it's 24.04 is the version, so I'm going to click that. Add a worry-free managed database. No, we don't need this. This is a static website, so we don't need a database, so I'm going to skip over this. If you have a backend and you need a database, you can choose this, obviously, but I don't need this. And then we have droplet size. I generally do a shared CPU on a basic plan, and I generally choose the regular disk type SSD. You could choose premium Intel or premium AMD. I'm just going to go with regular, and I'm going to choose the $6 a month option. Very, very affordable. We get 1 gig of CPU, 25 gigs of SSD disk space, and 1,000 gigs of transfer space. You could put a couple little static websites on this and you would be just fine. That's what I do on this channel is vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So these work really well for the sites that I build. Additional storage. No, I don't need to add volumes. Enable an automated backup plan. I'm going to skip this again. Since this is a static website, I treat my local copy and my Git repository on GitHub as sort of my redundant backups. If this was a client site, I would choose this. But since these are personal sites just for me and the channel, I'm not going to do an automated backup plan. I do think that redundant backups are obviously a great idea, but like I said, I have a local copy of this site and I push everything to a GitHub repository, so I consider that a backup as well. Choose authentication method. I encourage you to go with SSH. We definitely need to do an SSH key because we are going to disable root login and password authentication. And we are going to go ahead and add an SSH key. I've already created my SSH key. If you need to create one, follow the instructions here on the right. If you're on a Windows machine, you will have to use something called PuTTY. So you'll just want to follow these instructions. Once you have your key pair, you will copy and paste the public key into this spot. So I'm going to do that now. And I'll give it a name. I'm going to call it Lemon, which is the name of our project. And now this SSH key is going to get added to the droplet. Add improved metrics monitoring and alerting free. Yes, anything that's free, I'm happy to add. And then I'm going to rename the host, give it a new host name rather. So I'm going to call it Lemon Stack. It doesn't need a tag, and we only have one project set up here, so we'll add it to the default project. And then you can see down here at the bottom, the price updated to $6 a month. So we'll go ahead and create our droplet. And this will take probably about 30 seconds. And now that we have our droplet created, the first thing that we're going to do is set up our DNS settings. So we copied our IP address. Let's go over to Hover, which is where I manage all of my domains. And we have the lemonstack.com. There's a couple ways to manage your DNS settings or to point a domain to a server. You can use the name servers or you can use the DNS settings. We are going to use the DNS settings. These are the default values that Hover gives every domain name, and I'm going to delete them. We don't need them. If you're using your domain name for anything else, maybe you're using it for email, just be very mindful of what you're deleting. I am not using this domain for email, so we don't need any of these values, so I'm going to delete them all. And we're going to create two new records. We're going to create an A record. The host name is the @ symbol, which means the root, and we'll put in the IP address. The TTL, 15 minutes, that's just fine. We'll add that record. And then we're going to add a CNAME record. The host name is www, and the target name is the domain. So it's the lemonstack.com. I just want to make sure I spelled it correctly. I did. And we'll leave the TTL also to 15 minutes. Now, DNS settings generally propagate pretty quickly. I would expect this to propagate within the next 10 to 15 minutes. Don't be alarmed if it takes 24 to 48 hours. Technically, that is what everybody is going to say, that it could take 24 to 48 hours. I live in a big metro area, so those DNS caches tend to get flushed pretty regularly. If you live in a rural area, it could take a little longer. So don't be alarmed if it takes longer than 15 minutes, but I think we'll see this updated pretty quickly on my end. So we'll go back now to DigitalOcean, and we're going to add the DNS settings to DigitalOcean. So I'm going to scroll down here to manage DNS on DigitalOcean. And we'll go ahead and add a domain, and it's the lemonstack.com. Yes, this is our project. And DigitalOcean automatically adds name servers. Just leave these. You don't have to do anything with them. But this does say up here, you need to update your name servers with your domain registrar. And we don't need to do that. We are only creating an A record and a C name. But we do need to add those now. So we're going to create a record. The record type is an A record. We'll use the @ symbol. And then it'll direct to our new IP address. The TTL is 3600 seconds. That's just fine. We'll create that record. And then we're going to create a C name. The host name is www. The alias is the lemonstack.com. And I'm going to change the TTL to 3600. And I'm just making sure that I spelled this correctly. I did. We'll create that record. So now we can go back and work on our server, work on our droplet while our DNS settings are propagating. And by the time we have our server set up, we should have this, we should have the lemonstack.com pointed to the droplet without any issues. Knock on wood. I think it'll be fine though. Okay, so now for our droplet setup, I'm going to go ahead and copy that IP address to my clipboard again. We're going to log in as root the first couple of times just to get the server set up, but we will disable root login and password authentication. But for now, we are logging in as root. So SSH root at the IP address. And go ahead and answer yes to confirm that you want to add this to your local known hosts file. So we'll say yes. And now we are logged into our droplet. The first thing that we want to do is apt update and upgrade, because this is a snapshot and it's generally not going to be up to date. And you can even see here that it says 96 updates can be applied immediately. 50 of these updates are standard security updates. So we're going to go ahead and run the update and upgrade with the yes flag. And this will take a couple of minutes, so you'll want to settle in. And this always comes up during the updates. What do you want to do about the modified configuration file sshd config? And I generally always keep the local version. So I'm going to select the second option, keep the local version, tab to OK, and then enter. Okay, so the updates are done. And next it says optional reboot if kernel updates were installed. Honestly, I always reboot. So we'll just type in reboot and it automatically closes the connection from the server. So we're just I'm going to clear the terminal and we'll give this just a minute or so to reboot and then we'll log back in. Okay, so I'm going to log back in now using root and our IP address. And we are logged back in. I'm going to zoom out here so it's a little easier to see what we have going on here. So you can see here that we are using 13% of our it's 23.17 gigs. This is our IP address, the number of processes that are running. One user is logged in, that's us. The next thing I like to do is there's always this message of the day, and at the bottom here it says to delete this message of the day, run this script. So I'm going to run this. We don't need this. So the next time we log in, we're not going to see that message of the day. I will say this, if you're using the database that comes with this server, the password for the database is saved in this location. And I do have this here in the instructions. So deleting the message of the day means that you're not going to see this message about where this password is, but it doesn't delete the password. It just deletes this message and this path. But I do have it here, your MySQL root password. I do have it here in the instructions. So not to worry. Okay, next, let's just check and see what's installed. I'm going to clear the terminal here again. And I just want to see that everything is up and running and everything is installed. So we're going to check the version of Apache. Yep, that Apache is installed. And then we'll check and see which version of MySQL is installed. Excellent. And then we'll check PHP. Very good. And then we're going to see what the status of Apache is. And I just want to see that everything's running. And yes, so we've got green, active, running, perfect. That's all I want. And you can queue to quit. Okay, next, we're going to be editing some files, some Apache files, and I put in a little blurb here about the nano text editor. In order to exit and save the nano text editor, you're going to Control X, then you'll type Y and enter again. And we're going to do that several times. So if you forget how to exit and save the nano text editor, I did include that here. Here's the MySQL root password. We already went through that. Next, we're just going to check the status of the firewall. So UFW status, UFW stands for uncomplicated firewall, and this is installed with this particular one-click install. So we're just going to check the status, and these are the expected results, the expected output. So it looks like everything matches, so we're good there. Next, we're going to create the non-root sudo user, and you will have to provide a password for your user. So make sure that you write down your username and your password. Keep it in a safe spot. Every time you log in as your sudo user and you perform root level operations as your sudo user, you will have to give your password once per session. So just make sure that you have that written down someplace safe. So let's go ahead and clear the terminal again. I'm going to create a user, Angela. You would obviously create whatever you want your username to be. So I'm going to add user, Angela. And I have to give it a password. And it's going to ask me a series of questions, but I'm just going to enter past these. We don't have to answer these questions. And I'll say yes. Next, we have to add the user Angela to the sudo user group. So I'm going to put this in. Now we have to copy the SSH key that we added when we set up the server. The SSH key is specifically for the root user, so we need to copy that now over to the new user, Angela. So we're going to make that SSH directory specifically for the new user, and then we're going to copy the keys from root. So we'll run this next. Then we're going to change the ownership and the read, write, execute permissions for that directory. So we'll run this first. This is the ownership. And then we're changing the read, write, execute for the directory. Now we're changing the read, write, execute specifically for the authorized keys file. Next, we're going to disable root login with SSH, and we're going to disable password authentication. So this is now where we're going to use the nano text editor right here. So we're opening up this file on the server. And you can't really use your mouse here, so you're going to use your arrows. Well, I guess you can use your mouse. And so here's permit root login. I'm going to change this to no. And then I'm going to look for password authentication, which is right here. And it's commented out. So we'll uncomment it and we'll change this from yes to no. And then Control X, yes, enter. That's how you save and exit Nano. So now we're going to reconnect as the new user. So I'm going to log out. I'm going to exit as root. I'll clear the terminal. And now I'm going to log back in as the new user. We're also going to check and see if our DNS settings have propagated. If they've propagated, we'll be able to use the domain name and we don't need to use the IP address. But it's okay if we have to use the IP address. It just means it hasn't propagated yet. So we'll log in sshangela@thelemonstack.com. And again, it's asking us to confirm that we're adding it to the known host file. So I'll say yes. And this is excellent. This means our domain settings, our domain name has propagated, and we are able to log in now as our sudo user and as using the domain name. So that's great. You don't have to remember the IP address anymore. Adding now the sudo user to the www-data group. www-data is the default Apache user and owner. So we're adding Angela to that group so we can do our local deployment. So I'm going to clear the terminal and we'll run this. And we're using sudo for the first time in this session, so it's going to ask us for our password. And it ran that command. Now we want to log out and then log back in for the group change to take effect. So I'm going to type in exit and then we'll log in again. And then type groups to confirm. And yes, you can see that Angela is added to the sudo www-data user group. So we see that here. Now we want to fix our permissions. So let me clear the terminal again. Where do our files actually live on the server? So if we type in pwd, path to the working directory, we are in the home directory for our user. Let's cd to var www, and then if we list the files here, you can see that HTML is the default root directory for your Droplet. So let's cd into HTML, and we'll list our files again. And there's an index.html file here, and DigitalOcean puts that in there by default. So we could go to thelemonstack.com and, let me see here. It's saying this site can't be reached. It's automatically trying to go to HTTPS. So we're going to delete the S because we haven't installed the SSL certificate. So you have to type in HTTP. Because browsers are always going to default to HTTPS, so just type in HTTP, take out the S, and this is the default DigitalOcean index.html file. So this is how we know that this domain name is working. It's pointing to our Droplet now. So this is what the file that we're going to replace, and this is the path where your files live, where your website lives. So it's var www HTML. Now we have to fix some permissions before we proceed, or we're not going to be able to transfer these files. So we're going to change, this says here, fix the permissions. That 775 gives the group right access. So Angela, the user Angela, as part of the www data group, can update the files without breaking Apache ownership. So we'll go ahead and do this first. And I'll enter my password. And then I'm going to do this. And we are going to want to fix our permissions once we get done. And then it says here, if you want to make sure all future files keep that group, and I do. And this means that new files and folders inherit the www data group automatically. And then after we follow the FileZilla instructions and we actually deploy our files, I am going to come back and reset the ownership and permissions after. It says after rsync. I'll update this, but it's after we move those files in FileZilla. Next, we are just going to follow along on this list of instructions. So if you want to follow along in the GitHub repository, I have that link down below. For FileZilla, you want to download the FileZilla client. Just the free version is fine. You don't need the paid version and you don't need the server. Once you have FileZilla downloaded, you can go to File, Site Manager, or you can click the Site Manager icon in the upper left-hand corner. Next, I'm going to click New Site, and I'll call it the Lemon Stack. The protocol is SFTP. The host is the domain name or the IP address. Either is fine. I'm going to use the domain name. The port is 22, but you can leave that blank. The logon type is key file. The user is Angela. That's our sudo user. And the key file, on my Mac, it's a .ssh directory. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the private key that matches up with the public key that's on DigitalOcean. And then I'll click connect. And now we are logged into the server. And you can see here, it says remote site home/Angela. We want to get to that HTML directory. So I'm going to click the file with the two little dots. So I clicked and went up 2 levels. Then I'm going to go to var, and then I'm going to go to www, and now here's HTML. And this is the index.html file that we see in this directory. On the left is my local environment, and by default, I'm in my users Angela J. Holden folder, which is just like my root folder on my Mac. I'm going to scroll down to my project folder. This is just where I keep my projects. And then I'm going to scroll down to the Lemon Stack, double click. And these are the folders and files, rather, that we want to deploy onto the server. I recommend that you don't deploy anything that you don't need to anything that is not required to run your site or your project. So don't deploy anything with git or git ignore. I'm on a Mac, so I always get this DS store file, which my Mac creates automatically. I don't need that. I'm not going to deploy the license or the README. I also have some design files. So Affinity, Design, and PSD, none of those need to be deployed. So I'm going to select About, Contact, my images, and index.html, normalize.css, script.js, style.css. I also don't need this SVG folder. Oh, but I do need my portfolio. So we've got About, Contact, Images, Portfolio. And then we have our index.html. That's the home page of our site. Normalize, our JavaScript, and our CSS. And now I'm just going to drag these over to the remote server. And all of these now have been uploaded to the server. So this is really exciting. So now let's go back to our terminal and we should be able to see those. So I'm going to clear the terminal and I'm going to list files. And you can see there, this is all of our stuff. This is super exciting. So now I really like to reset the ownership and permissions after I deploy. So I'm going to do that now. So we're setting the directory read, write, execute to 755, but we're setting the file read, write, execute to 644. You can see there that it did update the directory and the file level. So it just took it down a notch and just made it a little more secure. So now we should be able to see our website. And then of course we're only on HTTP. We need to make sure that we get the HTTPS installed, and we're going to do that next. And I think we can do it right here. So you can see here that we have our nice website. Very exciting, very exciting. So let's go back to our instructions. So we know that the DNS is ready. We can go ahead and ping the Lemon Stack. We know it's working, but we can go ahead and ping. So we're getting a response. I'm going to Control C to quit. Now we want to use something called Certbot, and we're going to install an SSL certificate. So let's make sure that Certbot is installed. It should be, but we're just going to check. So we'll check the version. And there it is, 2.9.0. If you need to install it, this is how you do it. Now we're going to request and install the certificate, and we are going to request a certificate for the root domain, thelemonstack.com, and the www.thelemonstack.com. We need to do both because of the number of people who will go to an address bar and they will type in www before every single domain. And www is incredibly common. Many big websites are still using www, which is technically a subdomain. That's why we created the CNAME in our DNS settings. So we need a certificate for both. But every time somebody types in www, it's going to get redirected back to thelemonstack.com, just the root version of the domain. Here's the thing. It's totally optional which one you choose. You can have www, you can have not www. It doesn't matter. But you need a certificate for both, and then you have to decide which one you're going to redirect. And I'm going to show you how to do the redirect. I'm going to do the root, but we still need the certificate for both. So I'm going to run this command. And yes, definitely enter your email address, because if there's a problem with the renewal, Certbot will automatically renew the certificate every 90 days. And if they have a problem with the renewal, you will definitely want to get that email address. So I'm going to put in my email address. And yes, I would be willing. And what this is asking now is, which virtual host would you like to choose? You want to choose, okay, we were unable to find a virtual host with a server name or address of www.thelemonstack. Which virtual host would you like to choose? Choose number 2. This is the virtual host that Certbot creates in order to install the SSL. So choose number 2, but we are going to be modifying both of those files. Okay, excellent. And it should say, congratulations, your certificate and chain have been saved. Yep, that's exactly what it says right here. Okay, so now we're going to enable SSL if we need to. We're going to wait and do this. You can do this now. I don't think we need to do this. If you find that you're in a redirect loop, you can try running these 2 commands. Like maybe you need to enable SSL. I don't think we're in a redirect loop, but if we find ourselves in that situation, you could try this. There's also an auto renewal. So Certbot does something called a list timer. And it says here, Certbot installs a renewal timer automatically. It checks twice per day, or about every 12 hours. If it's within 30 days of renewal, it renews automatically, so we can verify that the timer is running. And I'm going to clear the terminal and run that again. And you can see here that the timer is running. And if you want to auto renew, or if you want to force a renew, you can, but we don't need to do that now. Now we're going to verify which domains are active. So we're just going to look at the certificates. And the certificate name is thelemonstack.com, and the domains are thelemonstack.com and www.thelemonstack.com. Perfect. And this expires on February 11th, 2026, but that will be renewed within 30 days of that date. Okay, so now we need to edit the Apache virtual host files to make sure that the redirects are working. This is admittedly the scariest part of this entire process, but I promise you, you can do it. It is nerve-wracking, but it's okay. You will be just fine. And honestly, you're going to learn so much about Apache. So right now I'm in the var www. I'm actually going to cd over to Apache, which is ect apache 2. And then if I list the files here, we're going to be working in sites available. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to cd into that directory. And if we list the files here again, these are the files that we're going to be modifying. I'm going to clear the terminal and list those files again. So first we're going to edit the default Apache file, and this is the port 80 virtual host. So we'll type this in, and we want to make sure that we are adding the server name, the server alias, and a redirect. So I'm just going to copy these, and we'll come right in here. So the server name is thelemonstack.com. The alias is www.thelemonstack.com. And then we're doing a 301 redirect to the HTTPS version of thelemonstack.com. That's exactly what we want. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to comment out the rewrite rule. And then I'm going to Control X, yes, and enter. Now we're going to edit the port 443 virtual host file, and that's this file right here. Certbot created this file when it installed the SSL certificate. So port 443 is the HTTPS. And again, we're going to add the server name and the server alias. Doesn't like that. And then we're going to add these rewrite conditions. And you can use the rewrite conditions that I have here. The only thing that I do to modify it is change the domain name. So just change the domain name to match the domain name that you're using, and you should be just fine. And then down here at the bottom, it has the server name, so we can take that out. We don't need it in here twice. And this also has a server alias, and I'm using Control K to delete those lines. So this looks like it all matches. Directory, error log. Yeah, this looks great. It's pointing to the correct document root, the HTML. So I'm going to go ahead and Control X, yes, enter. Now our virtual host files are up to date. So I'm going to make sure the rewrite module is enabled and reload Apache. And then I'm going to reload Apache. And if you want to enable individual files, you can. I just did the rewrite. Now we're going to test the redirects. So we have 4 domain names for one website. We've got HTTP, HTTP, and www. Then we've got the HTTPS and the root domain, and HTTPS and www. So there are 4 domain names for one site. That's why we have to do these redirects. So for 3 of these, we'll see a 301 redirect, but for 1 of these, we'll see a 200 status code, which is the OK. So we'll check this one first. This should be a 301. Yep, moved permanently. Location, https, thelemonsstack.com. This should also be a 301. This should be a 200 because this is the actual root domain we're using. And this is a 200. OK, right there. And the last one, www, should also be a 301. And it is perfectly. Perfect. Now let's come back and we can refresh. And you can see the browser automatically redirected to to https, thelemonsstack.com. So I'll refresh here as well. And there's our website. I like to set up my server and my domain name about halfway through a build, if I can. I like to know well in advance of a launch date that my server and my domain are ready and that I have a clear path to a working deployment process. And that is it. This is everything that you need to do to set up a LAMP stack with FileZilla and SSH FTP along with DNS setup. I hope this works well for you. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions or you ran into any problems.